Hey, TJI listeners, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and now YouTube.
Please like us, subscribe, and leave some comments. We want to know what you like, what you want to hear more about, where we're going. You know, I love doing spots for products I truly believe in, and the Freedom Boat Club Dallas is a perfect example of that. I've proudly partnered with them on Louisville Lake since 2018, and they later added Freedom Boat Club Texoma. Freedom Boat Club takes the hassle out of boating. You show up, you grab the keys, your boat's ready, you spend the day fishing or skiing or tubing or just cruising around. And then when you're done, you hand the keys back and head home. I've owned boats before, and I can tell you firsthand, ownership comes with expense, maintenance, and yes, headaches. Freedom Boat Club changes all that. Membership includes unlimited access to Louisville Lake and Lake Texoma, plus reciprocal access to 15 other Texas locations and more than 440 worldwide. Initiation fees start at about $1,900 with flexible monthly plans. If you've been dreaming about lake life without the hassle of ownership, Freedom Boat Club is for you. Just call the number 972-532-1901. Let's go boating.
Today we have a very, very special guest. This is a follow-up to our three-part series that we repeated, the rewind on the siege at Waco, and it's getting a lot of views. And so part 3 was the untold story, and we discussed the Oklahoma City bombing, of which you, Ryan Davis, our guest today, were involved in.
Yeah, you were on the ground, Ryan. Still, you were working at an Oklahoma City station when that happened. So that must have been a heck of a day. And we do want to talk about that. But you're a listener to the show and a watcher of the show. What we really want to do is we want to hear about Ryan Davis, how he got into TV news. And of course, I first knew him best as the Sky 4 power cam operator, photographer that flew in the helicopter all the time. And I think Brian and I and Ryan all crossed paths briefly at least. But before that, how did you get into TV news? Who is this Ryan Davis kid? And how did you get into TV news?
Well, that's an interesting story. I think like pretty much all your other guests, I never set out to work in television. In fact, when I graduated high school in 85, went straight into college, but I was pre-med. As a child, I loved science. I loved technology. In fact, my grandfather told me if I wanted to make a difference in the world, study microbiology. And that was back in the early 70s. And so I really took a kin to science and learning about. I love science. I always paid attention in school, so I had that background. And I guess it was about into my first year of college. I was like, this is not something I really enjoy. It's not something I want to do with my life. And so I went out as anyone would, right? And talk to doctors. And I asked them, I said, is this a profession that is going to benefit me in the future? And every one of them said, no. There's new things like HMOs and things like that are coming around, and it's going to be it's not going to be a good thing for doctors. And I went, well, okay, that's probably a sign. And I went and I changed my major. And I changed it to radio, television, film, thinking that I was going to go off to California and make movies. And because back in those days, movies and television were two different things. And about my third year working on that degree, a friend of mine said, there is a local, the TV station, KFDM, CBS affiliate. The local affiliate has a position for a photojournalist, and we all think you should apply for it. And I'm like, man, I don't want to be in TV. I want to work in movies. And so they coaxed me in, and I went for the interview, and I actually got the job.
And
And
that, where,
so
where's this now? Is this
this is
Beaumont? Am I remembering
Beaumont,
that right?
Texas.
Beaumont,
Texas, KFDM. We were I think a 130 something market,
Yeah.
but we had an audience share that was around 60 something.
Wow.
And we were the powerhouse. And we acted kind of as if we were maybe a top 40 market. And that's how I got started in television.
Okay, from Beaumont. Now, how long were you there? What kind of experience did you have in Beaumont?
I was in Beaumont until 19. Well, I started. This is probably late '88, and when I first started, it was part time, and so I worked Sunday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning till about 10:30 at night, and we didn't have any programming at all until the 6 o'clock news. So it was just me in the newsroom and a few engineers, and I was sitting at this TV station I had grown up watching, and I'm like, wow, what? How did I get here? And so it was shortly after that they offered me a full-time position, and I really really accelerated my learning, especially for television, and I was able to tell stories just like you would in a film, but there's just shorter in length and you have a whole lot less time to put them together. So that's in Beaumont. Beaumont is really where I learned my craft. I graduated with a radio, television, film degree. However, and this is a little funny, because of all the science classes that I took as a freshman, I received a Bachelor of Science in Communications.
Nice.
So I tell everyone I have a BS in communications. But Beaumont was really, really a pivotal part in my life and my career because I learned the business. I learned how to shoot. I learned how to put together packages. I got to a point where I was producing the local Crime Stoppers. And so I got to work with the police and SWAT teams and things like that. So it kind of started fueling somewhat of an adrenaline junkie in me because I was on the big hot stories and I loved that. I love doing that. In fact, doing Crime Stoppers, I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with that program. It happened a long time ago, but we would put on dramatizations on TV and people were urged to call 833 TIPS if they had, a clue to solving the crime. And there was $1,000 cash reward. So I was learning how to put together these dramatizations. It was basically the PIO would do a stand up, then we'd cut to voiceover, and I would have to come up with some sort of dramatization, like if a burglary of a business or something like that. So we'd start out with a stand up like we do in news, and then I would put together this little 45, 60-second dramatization. And when we didn't have a police officer, I would call my younger brother, Evan, and I would get him to play the burglar. And so he did that for me so many times. They would get calls going, "Hey, we know who did that. That's Evan Davis. He's," and they're like, "No, no, 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 no. That he was just an actor playing a part." But I got to really learn how to put together short films and doing it on the fly. And so that really, really helped me learn my craft as far as being a storyteller.
That is
And
really coincidence. That's a
I
real
mean,
coincidence because
it was
yeah.
interesting. And in Beaumont, we did a lot of things. And of course, that was, as you guys say, the golden age of television. It really was. I remember I got to shoot sports. I got to go to Cowboys training camp. I got to do all the things that you hear about. One thing in particular, and it really, I think, set me up for how I reacted in Oklahoma City, was in 1993. I was sent to Orangefield, Texas to go grab what we call a VOSOT, voiceover sound on tape, just for the 6 and 10 o'clock news. And the story was about a Catholic church, some parishioners that were smuggling in medical supplies into Bosnia Herzegovina going past the Serbian blockade and basically doing what the UN could not do. Well, back in 93, no one knew where Bosnia was. Kosovo hadn't happened yet. And so I'm driving back to the station and I'm thinking, wow, this is something that um, needs to be told. This story needs to be told. So I marched myself into the news director's office. This was a Thursday afternoon. And I said, David Lowell was the news director. I said, David, this is a story that we have to tell this story. And we also need to help them raise medical supplies. He thought about it. He got on the phone with CBS London and all the different people. And he said, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this because there are no journalists in theater. I mean, you're kind of crazy if you were to go over there. There's a war going on. U.S. military isn't there. I mean, you just take a rabbit's foot and pray. And I thought, we really need to pursue this. And so they put together the means for me and our 6 o'clock anchor to fly with them, and we covered that story. We shot a hour-long documentary and did a 5-part series, and we were able to raise a couple of $1 million worth of food and supplies and come back and tell that story. So that was pivotal, because I never traveled out of the country before. I didn't even have a passport. In fact, we had to call Jack Brooks's office, our local congressman, to vouch for us. And we got our passports done in 24 hours. And we were on a plane to Bosnia-Herzegovina that Tuesday morning. So that was a pivotal part for me working in Beaumont. In fact, when we got back, I was editing tape and logging tape for that documentary when the news director popped in the edit bay and said, it's hit the fan in Waco. We need you to go to Waco. And I'm like, we used to edit on 1-inch tape for all our big production. And you'd have to rent the room and have a director, and things are a lot different now. But back in those days, it took a lot of people to put together a story like that. And I'm like, well, I'm right in he's like, oh, I forgot. We'll send someone else. And so I didn't get to go to Waco. But in 1995, I had sent one of my resume tapes, to KFOR TV in Oklahoma City. And in March, it was March 12th of 1985, is when I made the move from KFDM to KFOR. They're the NBC affiliate. And it was an interesting experience because, young kid, out of Texas, kind of on my own for real. And it was a change. And then on April 19th, I was jumping into my news unit. It was probably around 8:30. I lived about 30 minutes from the station. And I think it was 9:01. It was when the bomb went off. But I hear this thud. And I look up and I see smoke. And I went, uh-oh, something's going on. And so that brought me into Oklahoma City full force just after a few weeks of being there. And that's how I wound up in being in Oklahoma City during the bombing on April 19th in 1995.
Talk about a baptism under fire. You've just been there a few weeks, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just a few weeks, and just kind of getting my bearings and just getting my kind of a foothold, because, I never lived outside of Texas, and I, was it was a little scary. And then that happened, which just kind of shook everyone's world, because, and people from Oklahoma will tell you, it wasn't just an attack on the Murrah building. It was an attack on us because we lived there. In fact, there was a pizza place right across the street from the Murrah building that we would go to for lunch. And I love pizza. Richard will tell you, I love pizza. And we would go there 2, maybe sometimes 3 times a week, just they had the best pizza. And we would park on the sidewalk next to the Murrah building. And they were joking too, because there were signs that say no parking, and we always said the NO stood for news only. So if we had to do live shots or anything, we just parked on the sidewalk. We were in marked news units, and they let us do that. Of course, that's not happening today. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. That probably one of the most interesting experiences in my career.
Well, take us through what you did that day. Just what
Well, I
I'm,
was
I'm
one of the
guessing it was
first.
live shots wall to wall for
Right,
hours.
I was one of the first journalists on scene, and because I bypassed the station, they were on the radio saying, "Hey, just get downtown, get downtown, get downtown." And I got downtown and just started shooting video, and it was mass chaos. There were walking wounded. It was mass chaos. And about an hour or so later is when everyone got mobilized and was trying to figure out what happened. And one of the reporters I had worked with, her name was Suzanne Steele. She covered the city beat, and so I knew that the fire chief at the time kind of had a liking to her. And so I said, Suzanne, because they had closed off the airspace, and I said, Suzanne, see if the fire chief will let us land the helicopter in this field over here. Let me jump in, and we will beam back live footage for him to see the scene. Because, I mean, back in those days, we didn't have drones, we didn't have any aerial assets that we could deploy. We had a helicopter, and that's it. So she asked the fire chief, and of course, he said, yeah, sure. And he jumped in our satellite truck. And so we went up and started orbiting the scene. And back then, we didn't have gyro stabilized camera systems either. So it was basically cradling a beta cam in your lap, and we had something called a gunny belt that you would harness, and we'd harness into a hard point, and we were inside a Bell 206 Jet Ranger that had a sliding door. And so once you got on scene, you would open the door, put one of your feet out on the skids, and kind of cradle that camera in your arm, and just try to do the best you can on keeping it stable. And we did that. Gosh, I think we must have been up there about 2 hours, because as soon as we got up there, we started feeding, and I started rolling tape, and the satellite control center said, hey, you guys, we're going to put you on the bird, which means you're going to all the affiliates, you're going to satellite. And at the time, CNN was the only cable news network really around. And so they took our feed, and we had a crew in Vietnam that was doing a story, saw our anchors on CNN International, and went, oh gosh, what happened? And so we circled that for until we had to go until we ran out of fuel. I mean, it was about 2 hours or so. I remember it was a cold, cool morning, and it was a little chilly. Of course, flying around with a helicopter door open, you're going to get a little chilly. But that was when I thought, good grief, and then satellite control said, guys, stay on that shot. Don't lose that shot. You're global. And I'm like, what is that? And then I clicked. Wow, this is going all over the world.
Let me ask Brian something, because that's what I remember is watching the helicopter shots from that. We were a CNN affiliate at that time, right, Brian?
Mhm.
That probably was Ryan's shot we were looking at in editing.
It was.
So that was the only shot there. Did you have any idea what had happened, like putting two and two together? Or what was your focus, pardon the pun, on that whole scene? Like focus on people, just the destruction? Like what were you trying to get out?
I had a feeling that it was an explosion. I didn't know if it was a bomb, but I knew it was an explosion. A lot of people at first thought it might have been a gas leak, like we've seen explosions
Right.
because of gas leaks and things like that. This one was different. And just with my experience of being, I mean, when I was in Bosnia with the CBS affiliate in Beaumont, I mean, we embedded ourselves for a few days with the Croatian army. So we were up in the front lines in Mostar, just outside of Sarajevo, and I had seen some pretty bombed up places, and that's exactly what it looked like to me. And it, that's one of the things, and I say that kind of prepared me for Oklahoma City, because when something like that happens as a photojournalist, you have to react, and you have to react with the technical training, white balance and focus and all that. But you also have to remove yourself emotionally from the situation, because there were kids, there were people bleeding. I mean, it was a mess. It was mass chaos. And having to remove yourself emotionally from that is hard. And I always say, we've got wonderful police and fire and military and EMS that we call first responders, but the news media really is a second responder, and we're seeing the same things they are. And I know Oklahoma City took a toll on a few people. It was a while. I never really sought out any counseling or anything, but it's been on my mind for a while. And I have not even. I was there exactly 365 days. I was there March of 1995, and I left March of 1996 to come to KDFW, Fox 4.
This
And so
this
I was.
podcast has always had such revelations for me, and this is just starting to sink in, because every station in America had that aerial shot, that we kept going
Mhm.
to that aerial shot, and to realize now that you were the guy in the helicopter shooting that is, holy cow, I did not realize that. Okay, is that the first time because when you came to Fox 4, or it wasn't Fox 4 then, we were still CBS. No, yeah, we had
We had
just turned
just
Fox, right?
changed. We were
Brian,
still owned by New World.
yeah,
Right. It was Fox.
yeah, okay. So that experience in the helicopter, is that what got you the job at Channel 4, at Fox 4 in the helicopter?
I think so. Before the bombing, well, and after the bombing as well, K4 had experienced some aerial fatalities. They had a reporter that had died in an airplane crash. They were doing some tandem photography, aerial photography, and then of course KDFW, Fox 4. Well, they weren't Fox then, but had a fatality with a helicopter. And so back then, not a lot of people wanted to fly in a helicopter. They say helicopters don't fly; they beat the air into submission. It's pretty much
And they try to
what
twist themselves apart.
exactly, all while violently trying to come apart. That's it. And so storm chasing was something that we did regular, and especially in Oklahoma. So I was on the storm chase team, but 9 times out of 10, I was chasing in the helicopter, not on the ground. And so I guess my love of flying and my expertise that I gained on the different camera systems that we started to use, because after the bombing happened, we were, I don't remember, here's where the fuzzy recollection comes in, but there was a camera company, not a camera company, they were a aerospace company called Aerial Motive, and they had a military contract. They developed the gyro stabilized lenses for Tomahawk missiles. So before we had GPS, Tomahawk missiles, they had a moving map that they would program to tell where the missile to go. Well, this company, and his name was John Coyle, had the technology for that, and he decided to build a camera system, thinking, "Wow, I could sell this to police and news media," and that's exactly what he did. So the Power Cam first originated from a little camera we just called the Peanut, because it was a smaller version, and we put that on the helicopter, on the nose of the Jet Ranger, and it was a scaled down version. It was kind of a prototype, but I got to learn that, and I was very proficient at that camera system, and I didn't get airsick.
Did you have joysticks to operate that?
We
How did it
had the
work?
original had a thumb control, but the camera that KDFW used, called the Power Cam, it's actually called the Stable Cam, had a joystick, and then it had other. I mean, it had lots of different knobs and things to do, but it was a full camera controller with a joystick on there. Big thing is I didn't get airsick, because when your head's down and your helicopter's moving around, you kind of have to be your own gyro stabilizer, because you want your shoulders. You don't want to be bumped around if you hit a air pocket or something like that.
Because you're looking at a monitor, right?
You're looking at a monitor.
So
Correct.
you don't have the horizon to help your inner ear.
That's right. That's right. So in fact, that company was bought shortly after we came to Dallas. Was bought by FLIR Systems, and that camera now goes by the name of the FLIR Ultra Media, and they've got several different versions of it. but I think that's one of the reasons why I got the job at Dallas, because David Goldberg was the news director. And that was right when you'd already changed from CBS to Fox, but we were still owned by New World. We weren't an O&O just yet. But his marching orders were to build the news helicopter that would outshine everyone. And
those were the days, right?
those were the days. Do you remember the movie Blue Thunder?
Yeah.
Vaguely.
Yeah.
Or Airwolf?
Airwolf, I remember that.
So that was kind of what we were flying in. I mean, not a Bell 222, or I mean, we were in a Bell 206 Long Ranger, and we had technology that, I mean, we could zoom in on a license plate at 2 miles away. We also had scanners and things like that. So David Goldberg was tasked to build this state-of-the-art news helicopter, and he did. And I think I was in the right place at the right time, and I wanted to get back to Texas, something terrible, because my time in Oklahoma, I mean, you were doing a story about the bombing every day, every single day. In fact, I think one of the most interesting stories I got to do in Oklahoma City was about a week or two after the bombing, before the implosion. And when they imploded that building, everyone was happy, because that's when Satellite City kind of broke apart and everyone started going home. But I was a Sunday morning, and here we go again. One of the guards, there's a building right across from the Murrah building. It was the Journal Record building. I think it's the museum now for the Oklahoma City Bombing Museum. And so the Journal Record building had taken a pretty hefty hit, because it was right on the face of that bomb blast. And so the reporter I was working with, her name was Quinn Tran. She was a wonderful, I don't know, I've lost touch with her, but she was just a very, very wonderful reporter and person. She had a joy about her. In fact, when she got mad, she would still smile. You know the type of people I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well, the security guard at the Journal that was guarding the door of the Journal Record building, because it was basically right next to Satellite City, goes, "Oh, hey, I know who you are," and da 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 da. So of course she turned it on and said, "Hey, we'd like to go into this building." And he goes, "Oh no, it's off limits." She goes, "Well, please, we just want to get in there, get some B-roll, and we're going to do a story, and we'll just be a few minutes." And so he goes, "Well, oh, okay." And so we went into the Journal Record building, and the entire, it's probably 5 or 6 stories at memory kind of going, but the only part of the building, the interior of that building that was intact, was the floors around, or the areas around the side of the building. So the entire center part of that building was a big hole. It kind of looked like, the hotels that have the big lobbies, and you see the rooms kind of go around on every floor.
Yeah, so it's like an empty space right there.
It looked just like that.
Well, let me stop you for a second. The Oklahoma City bombing changed buildings forever in the U.S., where they put concrete pillars so you can't get something close. Did you know that it was a truck that exploded out there?
Not at that time. It was later on where we found out, because what happened, what clued them in, was they found the crankshaft a couple of blocks down, and it had the serial number of the Ryder truck.
So it obliterated the truck.
Yes.
And they had to find a piece.
They found a piece with the
VIN number, maybe?
VIN number.
Yeah.
And so they traced it back to Kansas, where they rented that Ryder truck. And of course, we went up there. And during that investigation, that's really where it was interesting, because NBC News sent producers, and they sent people who were terrorism experts and people who there were some pretty interesting characters they sent down, and we would go have dinner with them, and they would talk, and they would debrief us, finding out, what we had seen, what we had heard, what our stories were going to be. And I was actually assigned to a group that, because we had different teams within the newsroom that were working on a certain story, and I was assigned to John Doe number 2. So Timothy McVeigh was John Doe number 1, but there was a John Doe number 2, supposedly. And so we were on the quest to find out who John Doe number 2 was. And that's an interesting story. We were working with Brad Edwards, who I think he passed away a few years ago. He was their on your side reporter, and loved, and he was on that team. A reporter named Jana Davis, no relation, was on that team. And we also had a private investigator that the station had worked with in the past on other stories, and he had a surveillance van, and he had all the bells and whistles. You thought we were the CIA, seriously, with all the gadgets and things that we deployed to try to find John Doe number 2. I've never seen another news organization deploy what they did to try to find out who these guys were. Now, later they found out who Timothy McVeigh was. There was never an identification made on who John Doe number 2 was, but they sent us all over the country. In fact, we went to Las Vegas, and I think it was the Sands Hotel, where we had booked a interview with Lana Padilla. And Lana Padilla used to be married to Terry Nichols. Terry Nichols is still in the federal lockup in Colorado. But
Terry Nichols was John Doe number 2. It turned right.
No, he's John Doe number 3, probably.
He wasn't.
Number 3.
He was an accessory, and there was another one as well. But John Doe number 2's identity was never. He was supposedly maybe of Middle Eastern descent, and that stirred up a whole hornet's nest of conspiracy theories. But the interview we booked with Lana Padilla, she didn't want to be on camera. And so what we did, and this story has never been told, unless I think one of the reporters wrote a book, and I haven't read it, but it may be in there. But this story has never been told. So Jana Davis, myself, our private investigator, we flew to Las Vegas, and we set this interview not on camera, but it was on camera. We had outfitted the reporter with a purse cam. So there's a small little lens inside of a purse, and she sat it on the table. She wore a wireless microphone. Our our um, our investigator wore a wireless microphone, and I stood just outside of the restaurant with a beta cam in a porta brace bag with a zillion 20 minute beta tapes and a lot of battery. And I stood there for 2.5 hours recording their conversation. Now, a lot of people might ask, well, how did you stand in a casino with a camera? Well, before we set this interview up with her, we went to the security and I got to see the big room with all the monitors. It was really cool. So the stuff you see in the movies, it's true. um, but we asked the security guys, we told them who we were, we showed them our credentials, we told them what we were there for. And they said, look, we can't let you plug in into any of our audio video equipment, but we won't disrupt what you're trying to do. So all the security people knew what we were doing. We were recording a surreptitious interview with Lana Padilla.
Wow, what a story.
And we, of course, that was a big package that we did. She really didn't say too much. And she may have known that we were trying to record her surreptitiously, but that was an interesting trip to Las Vegas. And I guess, what happens in Vegas does eventually come out, right?
I have to say that Oklahoma City's not that big a market, but it's always had a reputation for being a really, really good TV news market. And that's the kind of
Yeah.
stuff you would not expect from a market that size. And Brian, I know you got young people coming out of your classes at UNT and SMU. I think Oklahoma City, if they can get if they want to get a start in a not super big market, that would be a great one to send people to.
Well, this reminds me of something, especially your Beaumont story, flying overseas to Bosnia. Though that's the golden age, because the money's not there anymore.
Right.
Stations don't do that sort of thing anymore. Am I right? Or
No, you're exactly right. We were fortunate in Beaumont to have a wonderful grocer called Market Basket, and they really stepped up and helped promote, what we were doing. In fact, the I remember when right before we left to go to Bosnia, the accounting department, they gave me $1,000 in cash, and it was in 20s, 10s, and ones. and I remember, oh gosh, I forgot her name, but she goes, just make sure you bring back receipts. And I went, I'll do the best I can.
You gave me cash, so the answer is no.
I think I came back with maybe 1 or 2 receipts, but a lot of that money was to get us into places. There was
persuasive gifts, right?
Persuasive gifts, yes. But you're right, the golden age of television, they really don't spend that kind of money anymore. And going back to Oklahoma City, I mean, who knows what that investigation cost the station, or maybe NBC. We threw a lot of people, a lot of assets toward that story. And it was, I left during the trial. So when McVeigh was in Denver, I was there for the, I forget, it was a hearing, and I had given my 2 weeks notice to come to Dallas to the news director over the phone because she was sending me back to Denver. And I said, well, I'll go, but just know that I just received an offer for KDFW in Dallas, and I'm going to be heading back home to Texas. That didn't fly very well, but
yeah,
I'm sure they weren't happy.
Well, you got to do what you got to do in this business.
Right.
I really want to get back to Texas.
I think the saying is you got to look out for number 1 and be careful not to step in number 2.
That is it. That is it.
Let me ask a question. Like all news stories have to repeat what happened. So for people who don't know the whole story of Oklahoma City, can either of you two enlighten us. Why did this happen? What's the connection to Waco? So forth.
Well, we talked about this in an earlier episode that we did after that 3 Waco episode we did earlier than repeated. But Timothy McVeigh had been in Waco. There's pictures of him. The SMU newspaper interviewed him. I think the one of the Austin stations interviewed him. He'd been there, and he was he had this burning thing in his heart that he was anti-government, and Ruby Ridge played a role in that. And so what happened in Oklahoma City, it was no coincidence that it happened exactly 2 years after the fire at the Branch Davidian compound. Timothy McVeigh made that as a statement. It was a statement about Waco and Ruby Ridge and others, but the two were tied together. It was an act of domestic terrorism aimed at pointing fingers at the government over Waco.
And that was a government building. Yeah. So how did he do it? I don't get the Ryder truck thing, or actually I do, but
he basically built an improvised explosive device using diesel fuel, drums, and ammonia fertilizer, ammonium nitrate, and had a timing fuse. Timothy McVeigh was ex-military, and so he knew how to make an improvised an IED, and he used a Ryder truck to facilitate that. He I believe Terry Nichols, I think they rented that in Kansas.
They rented the Ryder truck in Kansas. Nichols had a home in rural Michigan, as I remember. So some of the planning and stuff was done there. But
right, and they actually assembled the bomb in a park, I believe.
Yeah. And again, fuzzy recollections come in here, but there's no question that Timothy McVeigh built that bomb, drove it, parked it in front of the. And he admitted this. It was by the time it got to trial, he was. In fact, it's really. Almost blood curdling to listen to him do an interview with. He did one with 60 Minutes, in which he, basically said the children, for example, were collateral damage. I mean, he didn't have any regrets. It was pretty cold-blooded stuff.
So he was found guilty. What happened to him?
He was executed, and in fact, remind me if I'm wrong on this, Ryan, but he didn't really fight the execution that much. He basically told his lawyers, "I'm done fighting it. Let him kill me," and they did.
So that's a story you were involved with, Ryan. That was it changed the world, and you were right there. But you end up going to KDFW. David Goldberg hired you, or was it?
Yes.
Who was
David
the
Goldberg.
chief photographer at the time?
Steve Stewart.
Steve Stewart. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, and I got to say, too, because I remember this, the Power Cam became a very key part of our whole promotional effort. There were commercials all the time, promos all the time for the Power Cam. And it could do amazing stuff. In fact, there would be car chases, and Ryan was so skilled at running the joysticks and everything that they could zoom in and get the license plate in the middle of the car chase. I mean, I may be overselling it a little bit, but not much.
So I have some trivia to throw in here, and maybe you don't know this, Ryan. Maybe you do. I don't know. Those car chases, so you were up there. I didn't know this, but you were up there for those car chases, zooming in on the cars. Well, there was a movie that 20th Century Fox was doing, Enemy of the State.
Yep.
And they called the station, and they wanted chase footage, and I helped facilitate the sale of
so that's in that movie?
So it was you.
It was me, and I had to have it approved by Kathy Saunders, and we charged them. It's in the montage at the beginning, so you have a shot in that movie,
right? So
I'm gonna have to go back and watch that movie. So it's just in the montage.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
What's his name? I can't think of his name.
Will Smith.
So.
And Gene Hackman too, right? That's a heck of a movie, as I remember.
I did not know this, but I went to go see that movie with a date or some sort, and sitting there, all of a sudden opens up, and I start seeing this footage, and I went, "Wait a minute, I shot this," and I'm like, Well, I wonder. So I sat through that entire movie thinking, well, maybe I'll get a credit or something at the end because I know I didn't get a paycheck.
That was going to be my next question. Well, the terms of the agreement were, per the Fox lawyers, no credit, no audio, no names, just silent X number of seconds. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what they eventually agreed to. And 20th Century Fox said, well, we don't need any of that other stuff. We just need we'll buy it from you. Do you want to know how much I sold it for?
Yes.
Please.
$10,000 for 5 seconds.
Wow. And that was 1996 money.
That's
Yeah.
1996 money. Adjusted for inflation, that would be $1 trillion, I think.
I think so. So. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Brian, because I've been wondering about that.
See, this
Because
podcast just blows my mind with the stuff that I learned that I should have known 20 years ago.
Well, we also gave a lot to, well, Fox owned the footage, obviously, but the World's Scariest Police Chases franchise.
Yeah.
1, World's Scariest Police Chases 2, World's Most Dangerous Police Chases 3, and we supplied them with a lot of content.
Because that camera system, so you're not hanging out on the skid, and
Right.
and you didn't get paid combat pay for that dangerous feat. You just did it. Right?
Pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much the way it worked out.
So once you got that camera system, nobody can get away from you as long as the helicopter has gas.
That's true. That's
They're done.
true. I got on one of those police chases. For some reason, the police helicopter wasn't able to fly, and there was one. I mean, it's the shot where the guy's getting yanked out of the
window
of his car. I think he's gonna.
I remember
fall
that
into
one
your living
vividly.
room. Well, DPS gave me an award for that because they lost, because he was going in the wrong way on the freeways, and he was circumventing capture, and the DPS gave me an award because their dispatchers were watching Fox 4 News and relaying that to their ground troops so that they could position themselves to get back, and because they had lost him, they would have never caught him. And I forget what he had done. And
it doesn't matter. He was running. That's all that matters.
He was running.
And we had this rash of chases. Like, it happened all the time. And I remember, do you remember Kingsley Smith?
Oh, yeah.
I think you worked with him, but
yes, I did.
He was one of the show producers. He loved it when there was chases. He said in an editorial meeting one time, this is kind of a boring news day. Let's hope for bad weather or some car chases.
Okay, I hesitate to tell a story here, but I was playing golf with a couple of police officers one time, and I don't play much golf, but I'm playing with them, and they're just kind of there's a little chuckling and sort of some side conversations going on, and finally it became obvious that they knew who I was, and one cop points to the other and said, well, you don't remember this guy, but it turned out that one of the police chiefs, this guy I'm playing golf with, the cops couldn't get away from you. So they apparently had chased this guy down, and he was, let's say, using maybe a little too much force on him, and he looks up and he sees Sky 4 above him. And he says, I knew I was in trouble.
That happened.
I remember that.
Well, you had Alan Wong, my friend Alan Wong.
Oh, yeah, we had him on a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And I can verify 3 of his stories. The first one, yes, people recognize us at the Louvre in Paris.
Yes.
That is a true story. The second one was when he did the live shot in downtown Dallas and threw the paper airplane. I followed that paper airplane for, it must have been 5 or 6 minutes. We went to commercial break, and when we came back as the bumper, they were showing that little plane flying in downtown Dallas. And that was kind of neat. That was kind of neat. But the big one, the big story, in fact, when I eventually left Fox 4 in mid 2000, Discovery Channel came out and interviewed me about the case of the Dallas police detective. They were chasing I think it was a kidnapping suspect, and it was around noon, and we're looking for the guy too. And I'm thinking the whole time, where would this guy hide? Because they had set up a perimeter. And we're at about, Police Air 1 was down pretty low, so we were stacked up. To let the viewers know how all this works real quick. In the news industry, and you have a lot of helicopters, what we do is the first one on scene, we fly what's called an inverted wedding cake. So the first one on scene will get the lowest spot, but we let the police take the very lowest. And then they fly a fairly tight circle or orbit around whatever we're shooting. The next helicopter on scene goes up about 300 to 400 feet higher and flies a wider orbit. And then the next one up higher, wider orbit. So there's something for being there first. Well, we were there first. And when we were looking for this guy, and it was around probably 11:55, we're just getting ready to hit the noon show. I find this guy, and he's running, and there's a plainclothes police officer chasing him, and he's got his gun out, and I'm thinking, holy cow, this is going to be a little crazy. And we were, as memory serves, we were probably about 1.5 miles, maybe even close to 2 miles away from him laterally. And we were up about maybe 1,200 feet in the air. He couldn't hear us, and he certainly couldn't see us, but we could see him because the power cam, that lens was, I forget the focal length on it, but it was a 72x magnification with a doubler, and it was gyro stabilized, 5 different, 3 axis, 2 of them were doubled, so you had 5 gyros on it. And the thing had a snout, so you actually had to fly the camera as well. But we were on him, and that picture was just as big in your screen as you could ever see. And he started wailing away on him, and he wasn't resisting. And then he shot him, and we broadcast that live because we were just coming on air. They took my shot live, and Alan, I think, was doing a live shot on the ground, and he was looking at the monitor, and he was just trying to do his best to kind of put things together because things were happening in real time, and you have to kind of figure out what's happening and how do I react to that. And again, trying to leave your emotion out of it, because you start hyperventilating or doing something like that, that camera's going to start moving all over the place. So you really have to keep your calm in that situation. And then you kind of do an adrenaline dump after it's all done. But I remember that that was probably one of the bigger chases and things that we saw with that helicopter.
And now you have drones. So are people using helicopters anymore? I don't know.
It's not as fun.
Yeah, it's not as fun, but you're still with your head down looking at a monitor.
You are.
And flying that.
We were very proactive, though, because, we stationed that helicopter in Grand Prairie at the Grand Prairie Airport. And we did that strategically so that we could get to Dallas or we could get to Fort Worth pretty quick. And we were just outside of the DFW Class B airspace. So if the weather was a little bad and you couldn't fly necessarily in Class Bravo, we could lift off and skirt around if we had to. So we were strategically in a really good spot. We also had scanners and stuff in the bureau, so we were listening just like our assignment desk was in Fort Worth or their assignment desk in Dallas. And so we were actively trying to news gather, when we were on the ground. But what was fun is we were proactive in our search for. We always said when news breaks, we fix it. so around 4:45 every afternoon, we had what we trolled for trauma. And
I like these terms. Yeah. Trolling for trauma.
And that was our daily sortie. where we would lift off at 4:45. I'd always call Donovan in Sat Center. He'd put me up on Cedar Hill frequency 2, and which was, we always wanted to shoot the Cedar Hill because we had something in the helicopter called nav track, and it's basically a radar dome underneath the helicopter that transmitted our live signal. And if we shot to North Dallas or to Nations Bank, those were just fixed horns, and so they couldn't track you. But Cedar Hill, there was a telemetry stream in that connection that told that dish to follow the helicopter. So we could literally fly circles around the Cedar Hill antenna, and that would track us. So wherever we would go, that helicopter was tracked by the radar dish. And we would be up for the 5 o'clock news. And back then, I think we ended at 6:30. So between 4:45 and 6 o'clock, we were in the air actively looking for stuff to happen. So if we saw smoke, or if we saw something on the scanner, or we heard a police chase, or Tim Heller was our weathercaster, meteorologist back then. He'd want a beauty shot of Joe Pool or something, and so we would give weather, those little weather bumpers they would have.
Oh yeah. So, make use of it while you're up.
Yeah. So we were in the air, and we were actively looking for things. But if they needed us for something else, we could go and respond. And we were in a great position to do that, because it would take us 5-10 minutes to get off the ground from jumping out to the helicopter. And we had the helicopter staged. I mean, we were ready to go at a moment's notice. They used to call us the fire department, or the SEAL Team 6 of the newsroom, because when things got crazy, they called us.
Okay, well, let's back up, and I want to take people. This is really fascinating, because I knew some of this, because I occasionally would even come out to the Grand Prairie office for some reason or other, and you and Scott the pilot would be there, and you had just a unfurnished little office. But what was your day like? What was your schedule like? And then, of course, there was always breaking news. You could get called to get on the helicopter probably any time of day or night, right?
Correct. We were on call 24/7. Our day, we worked dayside. So that 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., that coveted schedule, we worked dayside, was our official, Monday through Friday. If something happened at night or something like that, we would, of course, respond. It was a little bit slower, but we would respond. And then there's some things we would have to get up early for, like the morning show or something like that. But we were always on call. So we would get to the helipad at 10 a.m. and I would normally get the hangars open, and I got trained on the heliporter. That's a little device that picks the helicopter up, moves it out to the pad, and sets it down. And there's also an APU on there. So our first start of the day, we would always start off the APU. So I was the guy down there holding the electrical connection, and then they'd say pop, so we'd pop that off.
Auxiliary power unit.
That's correct. And so we would always do that first. I got trained on hot refueling. That's refueling a helicopter while it's still going. Big thing on that is you just have to know where to put the static line and make sure you're not going to generate any sparks. But so there was a lot more that I was doing outside of my photojournalism title.
And you got paid extra for that, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about you also. You would also occasionally go on the road, because I remember this is a Waco, Oklahoma City kind of follow-up. There was this thing called the Republic of Texas standoff down in down near Marfa, in that area of the state. And I remember you guys you would fly, you were down there with the helicopter down there too, right? I mean, you would.
Right. That was.
How would you get there? You didn't have enough gas to make a nonstop, did you?
Well, it took us about 5 hours to fly there. I think in a car, that's probably an 8 to 10 hour trip.
Yeah, at least.
Well, we had 2.5 hours of fuel on board. And you always had to land with 20 minutes as per FAA. I think that's right. Someone can correct me in the comments as usual. But we would go to different airports and refuel, and then just hop back up and head that way. That was I think they sent us there for two reasons. Number one, remember they had the media behind that kind of that little hill, that little mountain.
Yeah.
So if shots were fired, no one was really going to get hit. The actual scene was probably 5 miles or maybe a little less from that staging
I would have
area.
said further than that. There was no way we could see anything from
Right.
where they had staged the media. So without the helicopter, you couldn't even get a hint of what this Davis Mountain place looked like.
Fort Davis was where we were stationed, and I think they sent us for two reasons. Number one, we had this monster camera system that could, actually see something, and we could do live shots. But also, our satellite truck was not there. For some reason, it was deployed somewhere else, and the PackSat truck with, I forgot his name, Ron. The PackSat truck wasn't available either. So they used us as a bounce. Now, again, this is the golden age of television. We don't have the technology we do today. But what we did, they had a live truck that would send a signal to the helicopter. The helicopter would take that signal and we'd bounce it back to the station, to Cedar Hill, because we could get high enough where line of sight, that microwave beam could get to Cedar Hill. We could get up high enough to make that happen. And so we were kind of a quasi satellite truck in the beginning before all our assets could get to the scene. And then we were flying live shots at, morning, noon, and night.
So your career at KDFW ended, what'd you say, in the mid-2000s?
Mid-2000.
And what made you get out, and what are you doing now?
Well, that's an interesting story. After many years, and I think a lot of people, I don't want to say burnout, but
go ahead.
You get to a point where being on call 24 hours a day. I mean, I remember, here's a quick story. I remember I was single. I was going on a date in Dallas, of all places, because I lived in Arlington, really close to where the helicopter was. I could get to the helipad from where I lived in about 7 minutes. So yeah, we had it timed, but I was going on this date in Dallas at the Blue Goose. Is it still there? The Blue Goose on Greenville?
I don't know. I think it is.
It was a place I had been to a couple of times and thought it was neat. And so back then we didn't have cell phones. We only had those big alphanumeric pagers, and sometimes you just don't want to wear a pager. And so I left it in the car. And I guess I had told somebody, maybe someone in editing or something new. I don't know. But I told someone I was going on a date at the Blue Goose. And so they were trying to page me that night to tell me they needed me first thing in the morning at the helicopter. Well, they couldn't. I wasn't returning the page. I was only going to be in there for an hour and a half. So I'm like, so what? Well, of course, this horrific breaking news occurred while I was having dinner, and I get a phone call at the restaurant. And back then, the hostess was like, "Mr. Davis, you have a phone call," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" And it was kind of cool because I think this is a first date with somebody. I don't know, probably it was the last date as well. But I get up, and it's the news desk. And I'm like, well, first of all, how did y'all know I was here? So anyway, not to belabor that point, but they said, we need you in the helicopter at 4 a.m. You need to get down to Gerald, Texas. A tornado has just hit. And so we flew that mission to Gerald that morning. We were up for the morning shows. And that was quite a horrific experience.
Yeah,
and I guess
flattened the whole city.
I
flattened the city.
I've covered a lot of tornadoes and a lot of weather events in my life, and that's up there. I have never seen destruction or slabs just being whisked away like we saw in Gerald. We also had a photographer, I forgot her name, but she slipped and fell and broke her leg.
Oh yes, I know who you mean.
And we airlifted her back to the hospital there in North Dallas. And it was the first time we've ever gone under a call sign of lifeguard. So when a helicopter like Care Flight, if they're needing to get through an airspace without a lot of ATC holdup, you call in as a lifeguard flight. And we went as lifeguard. Our tail number, we had a call sign of Sky 4. So if you say Sky 4 DFW Tower, they knew who we were. But in that instance, we were November 44 Tango Victor, lifeguard 44 Tango Victor, and we took her to the hospital. So I guess you say what got you out of being in the media? A couple of things. I think the wear and tear on your emotional side can get to you. You see a lot of tragedy. You see a lot of good things too, but you do see a lot of tragedy.
Kind of sticks with you.
It does. And I got to a point in my life where I was like, what's next? What am I doing next? And I had befriended a gentleman who had worked in the oil and gas business. And he had just left a company and he was starting a new exploration company. And so for about a year and a half, 2 years, he kept going, Ryan, we need someone like you on board. We need someone like you. You need to come on board, blah, 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 blah. And I turned him down for almost 2 years. And then finally, I don't know what it was, maybe some divine intervention, not sure. But I called him up and I said, okay, I'm leaving a career that I know only went to school for, but I think I'm fairly good at what I do, and you got to realize this is a big jump. And he said, look, if you don't make what you make now in a year, we will bump it up and we'll make sure you make that. I wasn't making a whole lot of money at Fox 4 back then. Those were, $19.90.
Those were that was the golden age of TV, but it wasn't gold for people who worked there.
Correct.
And that's just Ryan and I have been friends for years, and that's a heck of a story that we're gonna have to save for another installment. In fact, as we go forward, we're gonna have you on again, Ryan, and maybe right away, but just so people know that he and his beautiful wife Michelle and I are great friends, and we work on projects together, including some documentary projects and everything. But this has been absolutely fascinating. As again, learning stuff that I should have known 20 years ago, and Brian's story about getting you on that great movie, Enemy of the State, and all that stuff. This has been great, man.
There definitely will be a part 2 picking it up from KDF. Well, there's so many stories from KDFW and then what you're doing now.
Absolutely. And I'd love to. I've, like Richard said, we've known each other a while, and I've worked with Richard too, because when the helicopter went down for its 100-hour service, which is when they would take it down all apart and put it back together, make sure it worked correctly, there was about 2 days, about every other month. I mean, I built up a little over 5,000 flight hours in 6 years.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a whole lot. In fact, I kept a journal. I've had those little need date books, and every story we covered, I would write it when I got back. I'd write it down. Was it a package? Was it a BOSOT?
Ooh.
Anything. I kept our fuel when we go, because we kind of managed our own fuel. And so I kept up with that, and just any notes for the day I would put in these little calendar journals. And I've got 6 of them, and I found them the other day. They're pretty interesting.
I wish I had that kind of thing. I really do.
And the police chases are written in big. Because
police chases were so big that it even ended up in Anchorman.
That's right.
You remember that Anchorman 2?
I do.
What's he doing? Speculate.
That's really what it's about. In fact, my beautiful wife, Michelle, will tell you, and she's from California. So I didn't go to California to make films. I wound up in TV, but I still got the girl from California. So
there you go.
But she'll tell you, I will be on YouTube, and there's a couple of aerial photographers I follow. And if there's a police chase, boom, I'm there. It's just been ingrained in me. Because I critique it, and then I hate to say there's entertainment value, but it's the old adage of cops and robbers. There's a chase in almost every movie we watch. And so when you get to live that and actually experience the real thing,
your adrenaline's pumping, there's excitement.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great episode.
Absolutely.
We have learned things we didn't know. And I never ran into you because you were at Grand Prairie, and I didn't ever go there. But we connected with Enemy of the State. That's very interesting.
It is.
But we'll have you on again.
Awesome.
And for everyone else, we'll talk to you next time.
Next time. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, guys.